It's a joy that after we've been coming and meeting together for so many weeks, that we've gotten to know each other. And it's exciting just to see the conversation that's going on among all of us, greeting one another. So this is week number 52. I know it'll be a little confusing for some of you that missed last week. Those of you that are watching us online, if you are watching this not currently, but a month or 2 months down the road, or I don't know when you might be watching this, and there will be, by the end of May, in June sometime, a brand new Volume 4 that will be revised with not only the corrections and an index, but will have the new chapter that we created and went over together last week will be included in it. So there was a new chapter 63. So in your book that you're using, whatever used to be 63 is now 64. And all of the rest of them thereafter would be 65, 60. You have to change every one of them all the way through the end. The good news is we're getting close to the end, so there's not that many that you're having to deal with. So it's our new chapter 64 this evening. And I can't keep going backwards. It was 63 to 64 because somebody watching on the internet is going to be thoroughly confused because their book is going to say 64 in it. So now that I've got us all messed up, let's see if we can begin. I will assure you that it's messed up my notes as well as everything else. So we are still on the summit. We had an excursus on the summit last week, and so we will have another excursus this evening, another view from the summit, the new chapter 64. At the beginning of the Gospel of John, John the Baptizer points out Jesus to his disciples and tells them, "Behold the Lamb of God." After hearing John's words, 2 of John's disciples tagged along after Jesus. We're summarizing the very beginning of the Gospel of John in chapter 1. Seeing them, it's after the baptism, and there's 2 people following him, and seeing them, Jesus asked them what they wanted, to which the 2 followers asked, "Where are you staying?" He said to them, "Come and see." And when they came and saw, they stayed. John the evangelist has given us such a normal and natural scene back in chapter 1. We can picture it. We can see it happening. What we did not see and could not picture when we began reading the Gospel of John, we now can see. From the first chapter through the 17th chapter that has brought us here to the summit, we have been following along with Jesus. The disciples ask, "Where are you staying, dwelling, abiding?" When Jesus told them and us to come and see, he meant so much more than showing them or us a physical place with a physical address. For 17 chapters, John has had us come and see the mystagogic world in which Jesus abides. In much the same way that Moses led the ancient Israelites from their baptism in crossing the Red Sea to the foot of Mount Sinai, where Moses ascended to receive the revelation of God, In much the same way, in the book of earthly things, that's the first half of the Gospel of John, John the evangelist brought us from our baptismal waters to the base of the Mount of Transfiguration, that we began to ascend in the book of heavenly things. We ascended to the foot washing in the upper room. Through the many discourses of the Last Supper, we have ascended to the summit of the Mount of Transfiguration. We did not know what we sought when Jesus asked us what we wanted. We did not know when he told us to come and see, that we would see, that what we would see was everything we never knew we sought. From the banks of the baptismal waters of the Jordan, he has brought us to the summit of the highest mountain. From the laver bowl in the outer court of the tabernacle, he has brought us into the Holy of Holies. With asensory eyes, transfigured eyes, we now see what we never knew could be seen. And we now know what we never knew could be known. We are on the summit. With transfigured eyes, we can now see as far as asensory eyes can see in every direction. In every direction, as we slowly turn, a panorama seamlessly unfolds before us. In other words, we're on top of the summit, and everywhere we look, we see a whole panorama. Timelessly, without time, we see everything, past, present, and future, and experience their presence simultaneously together with us. We share a presence, a timeless, eternal presence. No matter where we start, no matter which direction we look, we always see the whole. The presence of the whole, where once we saw only parts. This is where the Alpha and Omega abides. This is where the one who is the beginning and the end abides. The parts are all miniatures of the whole. The end is always in the beginning, and the beginning is always in the end. The end and the beginning are the same and are miniatures of the whole. He always begins where he ends and ends where he begins. If time would permit, we would enter into the mystery of Scripture, or the mystery of the church building itself, being that we have come to the writing of these pages during the second nativity of Christ. You see, in the first walking through and taking a class through the journey, at this point of arriving at the summit, it was in December right before Christmas. We are at a different season, and I will speak of that momentarily. So being that we have come to the writing of these pages during the second nativity of Christ according to the flesh, let us consider the mystery of the cave. One of the feast, Nativity of Christ, let us consider the mystery of the cave. In other words, we are here on the summit and we're looking around, and it's the mystery of the cave that we see, the Nativity of Christ. So the secret mystery of the cave. When thinking about the exact location of the birth of Jesus Christ, for most Christians in the United States, if not Western civilization, a familiar image comes to mind. Surrounded by farm animals, the Christ child is laid within a wooden manger in a stable that was likely made of wood with hay on the ground. Traditional images of said manger, the displays erected outside of churches on public property or at home, generally involve a simple wooden structure as the setting. Luke tells us simply that Mary gave birth to her firstborn son, and she wrapped him in cloths and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. In first century Bethlehem, there was little wood for building. There is still little wood for building in Palestine. Structures were made out of rock. Caves were used for housing livestock in bad weather. In his dialogues with Trypho, Justin Martyr, writing in 150 AD, says, "But when the child was born in Bethlehem, since Joseph could not find a lodging in that village, he took up his quarters in a certain cave near the village, and while they were there, Mary brought forth the Christ and placed him in a manger, and here the Magi who came from Arabia found him." In the proto-gospel of James, when Mary tells Joseph it is time for the birth, Joseph begins looking for a place of privacy, so he found a cave and settled her in it. Now the West has a barn or a stable for its scene. The East has a cave. Now we could create an argument over visible, literal issues. It is an argument over what we think we see and what we think we know. It is an argument over a physical place and a literal structure. It is a sensory argument over sensory things. But we have ascended the summit. We stand on top, and in the center of the horizon that encircles us in the distance, we have passed beyond the visible and the simple literal. With transfigured vision, we now stand in the ineffable timelessness of presence. The paradise of Eden remains. There is the cave in Bethlehem. If we're looking around, there's the cave in Bethlehem. Oh, over there's the crucifixion, and over there's the resurrection. Separate events on the horizon. The whole story is spread out around us. It is all here in front of us. And seeing that which cannot be seen and hearing that which cannot be heard, how can we now speak what cannot be spoken? Or how can we write that which cannot be written? Others have stood where we now stand. Let them now teach us how to see and enter into the secret mystery of the cave. You remember that the only appropriate response to revelation is worship. Not doctrine, not theology, not Bible study, worship. It is the hymns of worship that teach us to see and hear. Let us return to the cave in Bethlehem, singing the hymns of those who have seen and heard, that we too might discover the secret mystery of the cave. Hymns of the forefeast of the Nativity of Christ. Forefeast, the Sunday before Christmas. Christmas is celebrated as the feast. The Sunday before is called the forefeast. The Sunday after is called the afterfeast. Hymns for the forefeast of the Nativity of Christ. In Vespers, we sing, "Let us celebrate, O people, the pre-feast of Christ's nativity. Let us raise up our minds on high, going up in spirit to Bethlehem. Let us behold the great mystery in the cave, for Eden is opened again." Let us behold the great mystery in the cave, for Eden is opened again. When God comes forth from a pure virgin, remaining the same perfect God and becoming perfect man. Therefore, let us cry out to him, "Holy God, Father without beginning, holy mighty incarnate Son, holy immortal, the Spirit and Comforter, O Holy Trinity, glory to thee. Listen, O heaven, and give ear, O earth, for behold, the Son, the Word of the Father, comes to be born of a maiden that has known no man. Wherefore, by thy pleasure of him who gave him birth without passion, and by the assistance of the Holy Spirit, O Bethlehem, make ready. And O Eden, open your gates. For he who is shall become what he has not been, and the maker of the whole creation shall become the grantor of great mercy to the world." Notice what we sang. Let us behold the great mystery in the cave, for Eden is opened again. In case we missed it, we sang it again. O Bethlehem, make ready, and O Eden, open your gates. Bethlehem and Eden are a singular event. What we first saw as two separate events, separated in space and time, when seen mystically, are a singular whole. We must see beyond separate items to the singular mystagogic whole. What we see as single events are in reality miniatures of the whole. It's as if we stand before this gigantic clear glass ball whose exterior is covered with sticky notes, telling us of all the events of human life and history, all of the biblical stories. Big, huge glass ball covered with yellow sticky notes, or pink or green, whatever, maybe all of the colors. We are fascinated when we look at this giant sticky note covered ball by first this note, and then that note, and over here. And in some fashion, we began to connect this note with that note and one over there. And we slowly make our way around this gigantic ball. Now, this gigantic ball is so large that it will actually take us a lifetime to go all the way around it. Now, I mean by that, remember last week we got in the mail the new markers from Noah? Well, I just dumped them all out, Noah, but I'm going to use one of Noah's markers tonight. Now, I cannot draw a ball. I can draw a circle. If we picture, I can go from here all the way across to there. You know it's a ball and we're going around, but at least picture that much. And if I then, being there, go over 1 degree and come back, I'm here. And then if I go over 1 degree and go across, I'm there, and you get the picture. And it would take a lifetime, 1 degree at a time, going across, back and forth across, until you've covered the entire external surface of the ball. Only you realize, of course, you're going all the way around to the other side and coming back, and then shifting again to 1 degree and 1 degree. If it took a year to make one trip, like it takes us a year to go around the sun, with 360 degrees around the circle, it would take us 360 years to have completely covered the surface of the glass ball, the sphere we're talking about. So here we are externally on the glass globe, investigating, learning all of the separate little sticky notes. Then, without knowing when or how, we somehow spiritually thrust our gaze through the latches, in that space between sticky notes. As it were, through visible reality, and we gazed upon the invisible realities. In other words, here's this huge glass ball covered with sticky notes, and suddenly, in between the sticky notes, we entered, and suddenly are finding ourselves on the inside of the ball. We now find ourselves staring at the sticky notes from the inside of the ball. Now, if you can at least picture that, this is better than Alice in Wonderland. Let me tell you. Anybody can fall down the rabbit hole, for crying out loud. Wow. Into the interior. And from the inside, you see the hole. From the outside, you just see sticky notes, individual things. We discover we are within the hole. That's W-H-O-L-E, hole. And we see the hole from being in it, not from being outside it. It is now that we mystically see that everything is united in Christ Jesus. He is not simply one item on the surface of the ball. We have passed from death into life. Somehow, we have slipped between the sticky notes on the surface of the gigantic glass ball and have entered into eternity in soul and body, even from today. We are in the hole, W-H-O-L-E, and we see the hole, beginning now. In receiving the Holy Eucharist, one receives Christ in his entirety, and that which we deeply desire is actualized. Everyone not merely receives a mechanically divided fragment, a piece, but acquires the whole, which is given divinely. We are not parts. We do not receive part. We receive the whole. We do not become a part of the whole, but rather the whole is recapitulated within each of us. Through this same grace, this same gift, everyone is liberated because he receives the whole. We're not just down here, a poor beggar getting a crumb. We get the whole. We are all firstborn, and each of us sums up, the church, sums up the whole in miniature. This is the life, the faith, and the gift of orthodoxy. This is the language it speaks. It says nothing else. It repeats the same thing. That is why St. Maximus the Confessor tells us each man is the church in microcosm, and within himself reflects the entire church. Receiving only a particle of the body and blood of the Lord, you receive the entire paradise. This is what it is to be Catholic. This is Catholicity. We are not parts of the whole. We are miniatures of the whole. We are a living recapitulation of the whole. There is only one story, and every chapter and every episode is a miniature of the whole. The story of the paradise of Eden, of Adam and Eve, and the loss of Eden is a miniature of the whole. The story of a baby born in the cave of Bethlehem is a miniature of the whole. Seen from the outside on the surface of the great glass ball, there appears to be two separate and distinct stories. But seen from inside the glass ball, seen from the singular whole, they are the same story. The paradise of Eden that was closed to Adam and Eve has been opened to their descendants. The troparion of the pre-feast of the Nativity, "Make ready, O Bethlehem, for Eden has been opened to all. Prepare, O Ephrathah, for the tree of life has blossomed forth in the cave from the virgin. For her womb appeared as a spiritual paradise in which is planted the divine plant. Wherefore eating we shall live and not die as Adam. Christ shall be born, raising the icon that fell of old. Make ready, O Bethlehem, for Eden has been opened to all." Bethlehem and Edom joined together. Once more we are pointed to the secret mystery of the cave. Bethlehem points to Eden. The meaning of Bethlehem is found in Eden. The cave is Eden. The tree of life has blossomed forth in the cave from the virgin. For her womb appears as a spiritual paradise in which is planted the divine plant. This is the paradise of Eden from the opening chapters of Genesis. I should quickly remind us that in Genesis, the word garden is not used. The term garden is this rush parkland but the word paradise is used. The word paradise means a huge parkland, but it does not mean garden the way the word garden is used. However, in a Protestant Bible, the story of Adam and Eve in paradise is translated, they are in the Garden of Eden instead of the paradise of Eden. In the New Testament, the translators there in a Protestant Bible translated paradise as paradise, transliterated it, so that the thief on the cross, Dismas, when he asked to be remembered, Christ says, "You shall be with me this day in paradise." It's the same Greek word used in the Greek Old Testament, the Septuagint, in Genesis chapter 3 for Eden. The paradise of Eden, Jesus says, "You will be with me in paradise." And it's found again when Paul is talking about being caught up into heaven, into paradise. And it's found again about the tree of life in paradise in the book of Revelation. So every time the word paradise is found in the New Testament, it's transliterated paradise. But in the Old Testament, it's never transliterated as paradise. And so the connection between Eden and Christ, between the tree of life in the garden, in paradise, and the tree of life in the cross, the tree of life which is Christ, is totally broken asunder, not visible, and totally missing in that Bible. But it's not missing in the church. And it's not missing in the Bible of the church. It's not missing in the hymnology of the church. The mystery of the cave is that in Bethlehem, Eden, which has been closed to the human race, has now been opened again. With the birth of Christ, the gates of Eden have been opened. Wow. I mean, wow. I'm still caught up in wowing from last week. The child in Mary's womb is mystically the divine plant, the tree of life. This is the tree of life guarded by the cherubim with flaming swords preventing Adam and Eve from eating. It is this tree that is now open to all. In the oikos, the ekos of Orthodox of the Nativity, we sing, "Bethlehem has opened Eden. Come, let us see. We have found joy in secret. Come, let us take possession of the paradise that is within the cave. There the unwatered root has appeared, from which forgiveness flowers forth. There is found the undug well, whence David longed to drink of old. There the virgin has borne a babe, and made the thirst of Adam to cease straightway. Therefore let us hasten to this place, where now is born a young child, God before the ages." You see, in the Western world we're raised in, the only reason Christ is here is because we needed a victim to die on the cross. How he became a victim, how he became a human being is really unimportant other than he became a human. So now we've got a victim who can be sacrificed so we don't go to hell. That's the story in the West. We miss the mystery in the cave. We miss what in the world is happening here when we make the incarnation just a minor event towards the great event of the crucifixion, and the resurrection as only a footnote on the other side so he can exit. Come on now. Well, let's just look at this. We're not down in the valley of that nonsense any longer. We have been taken up the mountain to see what we never seen before, sliding inside the revelation to begin seeing the whole. You see, yet again, the mystery is embraced. Bethlehem has opened Eden. Come, let us see. We have found joy in secret. Come, let us take possession of the paradise that is within the cave. Let us enter the cave. By entering into the cave, it is paradise we have entered. Now, let me just quickly say, I'm not beating up Protestants. I have no family members outside of my wife and our children that are Orthodox. I am not beating up Protestants, but I am here to proclaim the gospel. I am not here saying anything about anybody else except what we've done to the gospel. We've taken a plum and turned it into a prune. And the sad thing is, Orthodox Christians living in the United States have absorbed the prune juice. Originally, when we started this class, we suggested that it was for Orthodox people who had already taken all the Inquirers classes, where all of this stuff is already covered. And so I always assume I'm talking to Orthodox. Well, then why are you bad-mouthing the Protestants? Because in the first Orthodox Bible study I was ever asked to teach here in the church about 28 years ago, I was asked to teach on the Gospel of Matthew. I wanted to make sure I didn't bring any Protestant understanding of anything into the church piggybacked on my back. So I got St. John Chrysostom's commentary on the Gospel of Matthew. And I would go read that, and then we would come to class, and I wouldn't read it in class, but I would share what I was learning to be the Orthodox understanding of the Gospel of Matthew. And we're talking about, in Matthew, of course, pretty close to the beginning, we have the birth narrative and the birth of Christ. We're talking about Joseph, that they didn't have sexual relations. And we're commenting on the verse, he kept her a virgin until after Christ was born. I'm talking to a group of retired Orthodox people. All their lives they have been in an Orthodox church. I thought I'm among friends. So because I had just now newly in the church bumped into the reality of the ever virginity of Mary. She didn't have any children after Christ. The prophecy in Ezekiel of the King of Glory will come in the eastern gate, and once he comes through, the gate will be shut, and no one will ever enter that gate again, being a prophecy of the virgin birth of the Theotokos. Isaiah 7:14, a virgin shall conceive. It was not a doctrine, it was a reality. And so I made the comment that the church teaches the ever virginity of Mary, and was headed on to what I thought was a meteor head part of the story. And the next thing I know, it was wham, wham. What do you mean? She had children. What about this? And they started quoting me. They were better than a Protestant, quoting me chapter and verse. Da-da-da-da, look here, look here, look here, look here. Wow. So I then have to dig out all the footnotes of all the verses and say, look, in the Semitic world, brother means kinsman. Abraham called Lot his brother when he was his nephew by our way of counting people, kinsman. And the word until only means from this point until you put a bookend on it. It doesn't tell you anything after that point. The goal of what Matthew was saying was he wasn't teaching the ever virginity of Mary. He was wanting to make sure everyone knew there was never any sexual relationships between Joseph and Mary. So between the time of the betrothal and the time of the birth, nada. That was his point, so you can't say Joseph was the father. He was not introducing the larger concept of the ever virginity of Mary. Well, why am I telling you all this? That's why I spend as much time as I do talking to the Orthodox about their non-Orthodox prune juice. Stop drinking it. It's not our task to say where God isn't. It is our task to say where He is. I'm telling us where He is. I'm not saying a word about where He might not be. I only can testify to where He is. That doesn't imply He's not somewhere else. But I don't know that, but I do know He's in this. And so that's what we talk about. So, all of you that may happen to be watching this somewhere in the world on the internet, I hope that lets you know who we're talking to and why we're doing it. And if you're Orthodox, quit drinking the prune juice. Come on now. The Catabasia, one of the hymns of the ninth ode of the Magnificat of the pre-feast. Mary sings the Magnificat in the Gospel of Luke. And we sing, I behold a mystery strange and most wonderful. Heaven is the cave, the cherubic throne the Virgin, the manger the place where Christ lay, the uncontained God, whom we magnify in song. Behold the mystery. The cave is not a cave. It is Eden. It is heaven. It is paradise. And the Stachira of the Nativity of Christ. Come, let us rejoice in the Lord, proclaiming the present mystery. For He has broken the middle wall of partition, and the flaming spear shall turn about, and the cherubim shall admit all to the tree of life. As for me, I shall return to enjoy the bliss of paradise, from which I was driven away before by reason of iniquity. Look at that. The cherubim that guarded the door now open the door, admit all to the tree of life. The wall that divides the visible from the invisible, the sensory from the asensory, has been broken. The cherubim now welcome us, pointing the way with lighted spears. You see, the swords of fire that once blocked entrance into Eden are now flaming torches lighting the way in. We have been granted access to the tree of life, Christ God Himself. With fear of God and faith and love, draw near. The secret mystery of the liturgical year as well. What is true for the nativity and the mystery of the cave, it was a whole. It wasn't a part of the story. It was the whole story being told. What is true for the nativity and the mystery of the cave is likewise true again and again throughout the liturgical year. Liturgy after liturgy and feast after feast, the church without time becomes the venue for experiencing in turn the living events of salvation as the whole panorama of the gospel is lived again and again. As yearly we journey from the Annunciation, the Nativity, the Baptism, the Gospels of the ministry of Christ, Great Lent, Holy Week, Pascha, and Pentecost, experiencing in each one the fullness of the gospel as it unfolds experientially before us. Now, we have an addition. You want to start those on the back row, start these here and around.
I'm on to you, Deacon.
I know, that's why you came, right? Joanna's faithfully watching these each week. 3. Okay, does everybody get one? Gail, they got them right here. They got hands up. They didn't get one. Okay, did everybody get one? Okay. Because by God's providence, when we arrived at the summit in our Thursday class, it was in December before Christmas, as I said earlier. We therefore, at that time, meditated on the mystery of the cave because that was the forefeast in front of us. On our journey, we have arrived at the summit during Great Lent. Last Sunday was the midpoint, the third Sunday of Lent, on which we celebrated the adoration of the life-giving cross. During Vespers on Saturday evening, we sang these portions from the hymns for the adoration of the cross. Rejoice, O life-bearing cross, O bright paradise of the church, O tree of incorruption. Rejoice, O life-bearing cross, the unconquerable triumph of true worship, O door of paradise. Come, ye first created couple who fell from the heavenly rank through man-destroying envy, because of a bitter delight resulting from the taste of the golden tree. Behold, here cometh in truth the most revered tree. Hasten to kiss it, shouting to it in faith, Thou art our helper, O most revered cross, of whose fruit, when we partook, we attained incorruption and received securely the first Eden and the great mystery. During the Orthodox service on Sunday morning, we read the Kontakion. The fiery sword no longer guards the gate of Eden, for in a strange and glorious way the wood of the cross has quenched its flames. The sting of death and the victory of Hades are now destroyed, for thou art come, my Savior, crying unto those in Hades, return again to paradise. In Genesis, in the Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament, Eden is called the paradise of Eden. The same term is used in Genesis that is used in Luke when Jesus tells Dismas, the penitent thief, that he will be with him today in paradise. There is only one story, only one gospel, only one message. We have been created with the image of God, the image of the God-man inside us. We were given free will that we might choose in our behavior to behave like God, become like God, become like the image of God, the icon of God within us, might choose to become a living icon of our Creator. Adam and Eve said no. They chose to live the way they wanted. They chose to live according to an image of who they wanted to be, of whom they wanted to be like. They chose death and died living in the world of death. In the fullness of time, God became man, that man might once more become like God. Through the incarnation, crucifixion, and resurrection, mankind's threefold separation from God, finite nature, sin, and death, were overcome. Those who heard, believed, and embraced the message were restored to paradise, where Adam and Eve were before they said no. Those who believed the gospel are now in paradise. We are where Adam and Eve were before they said no. Now that restoration does not include immortality yet, meaning we don't have the body they had before they said no. They tasted of death, they've given it to all of us, their kids. But we have been restored, and we now have the same choice they had. We have the choice Adam and Eve had. Will we choose to become like God? Or will we decline and, like them, become who we want to be? It's really nice to blame Adam and Eve and then to look for a victim to take the punishment, have him die on a cross and get out of here, and all I got to do is say, okay, I'll sign the contract, give me my ticket to heaven, get out of hell when I go. Wait a minute. You're telling me that's not the story? You're telling me that we were created to become a living icon of the Creator? Bummer. You're telling me that God became man so that we could do that? You mean to tell me I don't get a get out of hell card? In fact, you never even mention hell anymore. We get out of death instead? What kind of gospel is this? It's the gospel. It's the gospel that God created. We are restored to where they were, getting to make the same choice, and somehow we kind of want to make the same choice Adam and Eve made. No, thank you. You see, there's only one story. If we talk about Adam and Eve, we talk about paradise and its loss. If we talk about the nativity, we talk about paradise being reopened. If we talk about the crucifixion, we talk about the flaming swords of the cherubim now lighting our way to the tree. Metaphorically, the cross is the tree of life in paradise. It is the life-giving tree with Christ, the fruit of the vine, being the life-giving fruit on the tree. Everywhere we look in the church, feast after feast throughout the year, there is only one story. Each feast is a miniature of the whole. Icons are a miniature of the whole. Each parish is a miniature of the whole. Each believer is a miniature of the whole. There is only one story, one gospel. It has no time. It has no where. It is in everywhere. There is no time which has been without this story, this gospel. In every direction we look here on the summit, in every where, and in every time, we see and hear the same single story. We are living this story, and this story is being lived in our midst and in our lives. Well, we're still on the summit. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll begin talking about leaving the summit, descending the summit. We'll do that when we come back from our break. Okay, this brings us then to new chapter 65. Excursus, descending from the summit. This means that next week we will then take up beginning in John chapter 18. How does one descend from the summit? The question of descent from the summit calls into question the nature of the transfiguring event itself. If the transfiguration itself is seen as a singular, one-time event in the life of Jesus, then experiencing the transfiguration would likewise be understood as a singular event in the life of a believer. Such a singular event is commonly known as a mountaintop experience, an experience that one comes down from and essentially returns minimally changed or with little lasting long-term change in the life of the believer. I dare say everyone in this room has gone to some kind of event, maybe a church camp, when you were a young person and had a mountaintop kumbaya experience. You may remember the experience. You probably also remember that it didn't change one bit of your life. If, however, the transfiguration is understood to be the revelation of the presence of the uncreated light of divinity, always shining forth from the Word in the flesh, Jesus of Nazareth, then implications for a believer entering into the transfiguration would likewise be understood as a transfiguring of a believer, resulting in a long-term transfiguring of the life of a believer. The Synoptic Gospels emphasize their own themes in telling of the descent from Mount Tabor. Mark and Matthew both have Jesus telling the disciples to remain silent until after the resurrection. Luke simply says, "But they kept silent and told no one in those days any of the things they had seen." Silence is truly understandable. As Archimandrite Sophrony says, "I contemplated realities that transcended my understanding. My mind did not immediately assimilate my experiences, and long years went by before they were transmuted into dogmatic perception." Peter, James, and John never came down from the mountain. The life they lived in the valley was a life transfigured by having been on the mountain. They did not simply return to business as usual. John's mystagogic gospel is the result of the dogmatic perception he came to understand. The Word became flesh, and we beheld his glory, glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. 21 chapters and 879 verses later, John will have given us the mystagogic gospel of the transfigured life of the Word who became flesh and dwelt among us. Created equal by grace and equal in honor. In seeking to know how to live after being transfigured, that is, metaphorically speaking, how to descend and live out our lives among our fellow mankind, Christ's descent from on high is our example. St. Gregory Palamas reminds us that God makes everything like himself, and because by nature he is equal to himself and equal in honor, he makes the creation equal to itself by grace and equal in honor. And how was this done? The very Word of God from God emptied himself in an indescribable way, came down from on high to the lowest state of man's nature, and indissolubly, I can't say it, couldn't be dissolved, linked it with himself. And in humbling himself and becoming poor like us, he raised on high things below, or rather, he gathered both things into one, mingling humanity with divinity, and by so doing, he taught everyone that humility is the road which leads upwards, setting forth today himself as an example before men and angels. Trinity makes everything like itself. Creation is not made of the same stuff, the same essence, or the same nature as Trinity, but creation reflects the identity of its creator. Creation behaves like its creator. The key to understanding this is found in Trinity, in the Creator. By nature, Trinity is equal to itself, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and equal in honor. Equality exists within the Trinity and among the persons of the Trinity. Whatever else equality within the Trinity implies, at the very least, it implies the simple equality of essence and existence. That is, the equality of what Trinity is. It's stuff. I hate that word. Whatever that nature of divinity is, the equality of the what with how Trinity behaves, both internally within itself and externally towards its creation. This simple agreement of essence and existence. Do you get the two terms? Essence, what we are. Existence, how we behave, how we're living. The simple agreement of existence and essence we might picture as that fraction, existence over essence. Behavior over nature equals one. The unity of the two. 1 over 1, I should have put, I guess, equals 1 over 1 equals 1 to make the fraction understandable. And that equals the whole number we're talking about. He makes all creation equal to itself by grace. St. Palamas tells us, all creation is its existence over its essence. 1 over 1 is 1. It's equal. Every created thing behaves in agreement with itself. That is equal to itself. God, by grace, has created creation to be like Him, equal to Himself. God behaves like God. Stars behave like stars. Dogs behave like dogs. Cats like cats, and so on. But creation's likeness to its Creator is not just equality within itself. All creation is also equal in honor. Even as the persons of the Trinity are equal in honor with one another, so also all creation is equal in honor with everything else in creation. There is equality in all things by grace, and equality of honor among all things. Everything created is existence and essence equal, and then all of creation is equal in honor with every other thing of creation. Equality of honor does not imply equal identity. Dogs are not cats. Owls are not elephants. But dogs, cats, and elephants are all equal in honor. They each within themselves are existence and essence, 1 over 1, equal to themselves within themselves. And by being equal within themselves, they are each a single whole, equal to all other single wholes. 8 over 8 is equal to 12 over 12, is equal to 35 over 35. Not one is more important or more valuable, which is to say, not one is less valuable than any of the others. Does that make sense? We could express this equality by grace and equality of honor by whole fractions, with the denominator representing a specific created entity: 1 over 1, 2 over 2, 3 over 3, 4, 5, 6, 439 over 439. Each fraction is a whole fraction equal to itself. The numerator is equal to the denominator. But the value of every whole fraction is equal to the value of every other whole fraction. The value, the honor of every whole fraction is 1. Every whole fraction, no matter 5,000 over 5,000 or 2 over 2, are equal in honor to each other. They all equal 1. This is how God created creation, to be equal to itself by grace, existence and essence, and equal in honor with every other entity of creation. God, in creating creation, imputed an equality of honor between himself and his creation. God did not see creation as less than himself. He did not see creation inferior to himself. He saw himself reflected in his creation. Creation was good. It was equal to itself. God treated his creation as equal in honor to himself. Satan rebelled against being created equal in honor with the rest of creation. He especially rebelled against being equal in honor with Adam and Eve. How could God ever see him equal in honor with living dirt? Satan rebelled against being like God. He rebelled against being equal to himself, as defined by God, and equal to God in honor. He did not want to be like God. He wanted to be God, his own God. He wanted to define his own existence and not have it defined within him by God. I'll create my own denominator, thank you very much. Satan refused to be equal in honor with God. Satan sought to seize and grasp equality with God by being independent from God, so that there would be two gods standing equally independent of each other. Satan wanted to be God on his own. He desired to become God without God. Adam and Eve made Satan their God. By so doing, Adam and Eve rejected being equal to themselves by grace. They refused to have their existence, their behavior, be in agreement with the image of God, their essence, given to them by the Creator. They no longer lived in agreement with their essence. The likeness of their behavior no longer was equal to the image of God, the icon of God they carried within themselves. Of all creation, only mankind has rebelled against being equal with itself. Now, nothing in creation had gone astray with regard to the notions of God, save man only. Why, neither sun, nor moon, nor heaven, nor the stars, nor water, nor air had swerved from their order, but knowing their artificer and sovereign, the Word, they remain as they were made. Additionally, following the example of the God they now followed, Adam and Eve rejected being equal in honor. They rejected the equality in honor of the sexes, the war between the sexes. They rejected the equality in honor of all races, tribes, and ethnicities. They rejected the equality in honor of mankind and his world and all that was in the world. By rejecting the equality in honor of all creation, and especially of all fellow human beings, Adam and Eve embraced a world based on the superiority and inferiority observable in beings, and the resulting envy and treachery, as also the disputes, both open and concealed, which this caused. If we are not all equal in honor with one another, then we divide ourselves into, well, some of us are better than some others. Some of us are less than others. We're either equal in honor or we're superior/inferior. Adam and Eve and all mankind rebelled and continue to rebel against being equal in honor with one another, and most especially rebels against being equal in honor with creation and how we behave towards creation. How could God ever see mankind as equal in honor with a non-rational creation? But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman. But notice how he came. Unlike Satan, Christ did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped. The Trinity is equal to itself and equal in honor. It does not grasp and claim all equality for itself. The Trinity bestows equality in honor upon its creation. Trinity demonstrated the reality of equality in honor when the Word emptied himself, taking the form of a servant and being made in the likeness of men. The Word came to save, not to impress. He did not come just to appear and to dazzle the beholders, but for one seeking to heal and teach. The way is not simply to sojourn here, but to give himself to those in want, and to appear as they who need him can bear it, that he may not, by exceeding the requirements of the sufferer, trouble the very persons that need him, rendering God's appearance useless to them. He doesn't come and overpower us in such a way that we cannot absorb. We give so much attention to the visible acts of salvation, the nativity, the crucifixion, the resurrection, that we fail to see what is invisibly present and hidden. This is God behaving as God. How so? This is God deeming His creation equal in honor to Himself. God is treating humanity as equal in honor to Himself by becoming one of us. This is not God in His superiority patronizing His inferior creation. This is God who created His creation equal in honor to Himself, verifying the reality of having done so, of having created us equal in honor to Himself, by treating us as equal in honor to Him by His very behavior towards us. It is often said that God condescended to become a man. However, in today's language, if one is condescending, it implies a patronizing act of superiority done in behalf of an inferior. From a human point of view, influenced by the fall, from which superiority and inferiority come, fallen humanity is inferior to the superior God who condescended to become a lowly human in order to save our miserable selves. It is not the fall, but the God who created us that defines Himself and His behavior towards us and in our behalf. He makes everything equal to Himself, and because by nature He is equal to Himself and equal in honor, He makes the creation equal to itself and equal in honor. In other words, if we take the human understanding, superior God comes to miserable humans. God's not behaving like Himself. God created creation equal by grace to itself and equal in honor. If God in Trinity is equal in honor, and He has created creation equal in honor, and we are the only ones that have blown it, and in order to fix it, He comes to us. He doesn't come to us as a tyrant. That's a contradiction of who He is. He who created us equal in honor comes to us equal in honor to us. Wow. He can't contradict Himself and come as a tyrant, angry God. And He doesn't. He doesn't come acting all superior to we and our inferiority. He makes everything like Himself, and He achieves our restoration by the same means He achieved our creation. He once again makes everything like Himself. He doesn't create us like Himself with equality and honor and then restore us out of creating a relationship based on inequality of superior and inferior. Where would such a restoration come from? It cannot come from God who is equal to Himself and equal in honor, a restoration based on superior and inferior. A restoration based on superiority versus inferiority can only come from Satan and the fall of mankind. That's where it comes from to begin with. God does not condescend, but descends. Now, I know in the language of the church, we're going to use condescension. It is a technical theological term. I'm talking about the normal way of condescending, the way most of us in the pew hear the term when we hear it. God does not condescend, superior to inferior, but descends in equality in honor with mankind. His descending is a kenotic ecstasis, a self-emptying in behalf of others that he deems equal to himself. He who is not equal to his creation by nature, us, he demonstrates that he creates as equal in honor with himself by the self-emptying of Christ. The Word who became flesh does not see himself as superior to humanity. He's not here slumming. He sees humanity equal in honor to himself. This is the center from which all of his behavior springs. You are my equal in honor, and I will treat you as such. This is what it means to descend from the Mount of Transfiguration. We descend like Christ descended. We descend desiring like Christ to be equal to ourselves, and like Christ to see all other humans as equal in honor to ourselves. We use the term love, kenosis, ecstasis, self-emptying towards others. All these point to a behavior based on a singular reality, being equal to ourselves and seeing everyone else as equal in honor to ourselves. According to the three Gospels that speak directly of the Transfiguration, those who returned from the Mount of Transfiguration told no one about their experience until at least after the resurrection. Let us learn the lesson well. It is not the telling of what we experienced that authenticates we ascended to the summit. The authentication of having ascended the Mount of Transfiguration is the changed lives of those who descend from the Mount of Transfiguration. They now treat every human being as equal in honor to themselves. It has been a wonderful journey up the mountain together with you. And now we begin descending, changed, learning how to be changed, learning how to walk down the mountain. Next week we'll start with chapter 18. Thank you, and be careful going home tonight.